Well, it's a great pleasure to be here today with Frederick Forsyth, one of our most distinguished authors, somebody I've enjoyed reading over decades, and indeed seen the famous film The Day of the Jackal. So, Frederick, thank you so much for allowing me to come and visit you at home. And you've had a most fascinating career, dozens of books, the films from it, but your basic career was a journalist.
I started out, yes, I actually, back in my day, God, it's a long time ago, national service was compulsory. And so that was beckoning me. It was compulsory, and I decided in any case that unlike most young men in my era, I wanted it. I wanted to go in because I wanted to go into the Air Force and I wanted to fly. This was my towering ambition, to fly and get those cherished wings on the chest as a British fighter pilot. And so I rather amazed the recruiting sergeant in the where I went to sign on, because he'd got a stream of young men trying to get out, trying to get exemption from national service, and I was trying to get in. And so he he took this aboard, and this is truth. Shoved a piece of paper at me, said, "Sign there, lad." I signed. I said, "You're in." And now I actually managed to get in, wangle my way, I think is the word, at 17 and a half, where the legal minimum age was 18. So I found myself later in the odd position of being the only boy, I suppose, who was flying single-seater jet fighters at 18.
As you actually got to fly, because my father did national service in the RAF and he never got on an aeroplane.
Oh, may I be boastful?
Yes.
That little boy over there.
Oh, that's you. Yes. Oh, that's wonderful.
19 years old.
19 years old. And you got to fly.
The reason I left the Air Force was because after getting my wings, I wanted to be assigned to a supersonic squadron. And I was told mockingly that I would have as much chance of that as flying to the moon. I would much more likely be assigned to fly a desk. So I thought, well, if I'm going to fly a desk, I can do it for a larger salary in journalism. And I had a second ambition, which was to see the world. I came from a very small, sort of one-horse town, market town called Ashford in Kent. And my father, with great encouragement from a wonderful father, he said, "No, get out. Don't sell shirts and ties the rest of your life. Most of your contemporaries will inherit their dad's firm shop. Get out, see the world. I've seen it." She had in his youth. He said, "Get out and see the world. It's a wonderful place." And I thought, yes, I've got to do that. Now, how do I do it? There's one job I can think of, and that is being a foreign correspondent. The editor will send you to various places where things are happening. It's interesting. It's varied. That's where I'll be. So I left the RAF and joined journalism as a cub reporter. And after 3 years, then went to London, to Fleet Street, which then was the headquarters of British journalism, and was very lucky. I got an interview with Reuters, which is only foreign correspondence. I happened, coincidentally, to speak fluent German and French. So when they learned that, they gave me a job and sent me straight to Paris. And right into the heart of a tumultuous situation, the OAS trying to assassinate Charles de Gaulle. And this isn't some sort of third world back and beyond country. This was France. And it would have triggered, I think, probably a civil war in France had they succeeded. So right in the heart of this maelstrom of violence and police and terrorism, I found myself as a 22-year-old foreign correspondent.
Covering the OAS. And who exactly were the OAS?
Oh, the organisation, it was called the Armed OAS Service. It was basically a group of extreme right-wingers. Charles de Gaulle was quietly negotiating with the Algerian national movement to give Algeria back to the Algerians. It had been for a long time, 200 years at least, a French colony. There was a very strong move to oppose that and keep Algeria as French. There were actually 500,000 French soldiers in in Algeria under President Coty, de Gaulle, although supposedly a French nationalist, was actually a realist. And he recognised that you can't go on doing that. This was the early 60s, and it was the days of empire were over.
But it was a big U-turn by de Gaulle, wasn't it? Because the people who campaigned for Algiers to be French thought de Gaulle was on their side.
They did. They brought him to power. And that was why they regarded his volte-face as a traitor, treachery. So they turned against him and decided to assassinate him.
And the OAS was part of the French state?
No, absolutely not. They were rebels.
They were a terrorist organisation.
They were terrorists and they were rebels. Some of them were civilians, the so-called pieds noirs, or Blackfeet, which are the civilian settlers, French settlers in Algeria, and the right wing of the French armed forces.
So the French state was involved, that the armed forces formally, people who had taken the equivalent of the king's shilling, the president's shilling,
indeed,
were signed up to a terrorist organisation.
They went into a state of open mutiny. So you had the French Foreign Legion marching out of their barracks in Oman, singing "Non je ne regrette rien," and marching into mutiny, open mutiny, and attempting to assassinate the head of state. That's pretty serious, assassinating the head of state.
And is this what gave you the idea for The Day of the Jackal, which is probably your most famous book?
Yeah, I was covering this story, and I formed a very private opinion. It was justified. I didn't reveal it to anybody because I thought it's not my job. But I thought if they are ever going to succeed in assassinating Charles de Gaulle, they won't do it by using their own killers, because the French counterintelligence was so penetrated, the OAS, that they knew virtually who every one of them was. And they were picking them up one after the other, on one charge after another, and putting them in prison. I thought they might possibly succeed if they brought in an outsider, someone completely unknown to the French counterintelligence and the French police. And that idea I nurtured for 7 years, until eventually I thought I got back from Biafra, which is another name that many reviewers won't recognise, but it was the Nigerian Civil War, which I covered first of all as a BBC man and then later as a freelance. I got back from that skint in 1970. I hadn't got a flat, I hadn't got a car, I hadn't got a career, I hadn't got a job, I hadn't got a likelihood of getting a job. I'd been well and truly demonised by the Foreign Office because I'd been on the wrong side. So I thought, what do I do now? And then I had this crazy idea. It was a crazy idea, and everybody I knew told me it was an insane idea. Well, you're really sort of as far down as it can be. What are you going to do to get out of the hole? I'm going to write a novel. What a stupid idea. So I was told, for God's sake, rob a bank if you must, but write a novel. I thought, oh, well, I've got nothing else to do. So I sat down, I hadn't got a flat. I was actually sleeping on the sofa of a friend's flat. And when they went to work every morning about 8:30, I just got myself to the kitchen table and began to type. And I typed out those 350 sheets, which became The Day of the Jackal, in 35 days at 10 pages a day. And if I say it myself, but slightly boastfully, not a single word has ever been changed to this day. So that was the manuscript I took to the publishers. So they took it as was. They didn't change a line. They just published it the way it was.
And in it, you actually provide a method for criminals to get passports, which carried on being used for decades.
Yes, I did. I got that from a professional mercenary whom I met in Biafra, in Africa. And I said to him, false papers. How do you get down here? He said, oh, false papers. The Frenchman. I said, how do you do that? He said, well, in English, it's easy. I said, really? Well, being British, I thought our system was pretty infallible. Oh, no, he said, it's simple. And he explained to me exactly how to do it. I copied it exactly, and then I did a test run. I actually submitted an application for a false passport, and it came back in the post. So I thought, wow. Then, having exposed it, I thought our establishment would stop it. But it didn't.
Even the police used it for undercover work, it subsequently emerged.
And the KGB used it. All sorts of people used it.
And it went on for 30 years after you exposed it or something.
I thought the establishment would simply stop it. I mean, change the system and make it impossible to do that way, but they never did. So I get the blame, if blame is the word, for having, I thought, exposed. But I certainly never recommended it, but it is apparently not now, because it's all computerized. But when it wasn't computerized, you could actually just apply in someone else's name.
The Day of the Jackal was the first of many successful books that...
I did 16, 17, yes, over the period.
Which have given enormous pleasure to people. Well, and you have such an insight into the secret world, the world of spies, and the world of criminals. And this came from your journalistic experience.
It did, indeed. And one thing journalism taught me was how to research. And go, I mean, basically, find the expert and say, sit down with him and say, no, come on, just tell me, how do you do this? How do you do that? It's surprising how open experts in their own field will be. There's a kind of pride, even if it's illegality, a perverse pride, but pride on how to fool the system, so to speak. So that's what I do.
And sometimes you could get the advice from criminals because criminals would speak to journalists in a way they wouldn't speak to anybody else.
Right. Yep. I got cooperation only from both officialdom and the underworld.
And you were going back and forth across the Iron Curtain as a journalist, and in a time when it was being closely watched by every secret service in the world. And I've seen in the Times diary that you did this by pretending to be Bertie Wooster, who is one of my great heroes. I'm an absolute P.G. Wodehouse fanatic. So tell me about your time as Bertie Wooster.
It was a question of how to cope. When I arrived in East Berlin, I was appointed East Berlin, Russia correspondent for East Berlin. The only, after the building of the wall, the only Western correspondent who retained a position in East Berlin was the Reutermann. Everybody else was withdrawn. So there I was with the dreaded Stasis, the Staatssicherheitsdienst, for short Stasis, East German secret police, a very nasty crew. And they really, they'd got an enormous manpower, only one target. So I thought, I'm going to be followed, and I was followed on the street, followed. My flat bugged, my office bugged, my car followed, and so on. And I thought there's only one way to cope with this if you're not going to have a nervous breakdown, and that is take the mickey. So, which is the one lingo they did not have. They had no grip of humour whatsoever. So I thought the only way is to fool them by fooling them. So whenever I was picked up or in their hands, I put on this act of benign, eager to please, hopeless, helpless, hapless idiot. Bertie Wooster, in other words. Terrible German, very poor accent, poor vocabulary, grammar, the lot. And very eager to please, but a congenital fool. And I named him Bertie Wooster. And the Stasis thought that was me. As soon as the red and white pole dropped behind my car, I could drive away and drop that and become a German, because I could pass for German in German. So in East Germany, that meant I could disappear, which drove them potty with frustration.
So they thought you were a fool, therefore you went through, they weren't following you as closely as they should have done, you therefore escaped and could speak to lots of contacts and find out what was really going on in Eastern Germany.
That's what I used to do.
And did this have an impact on your political views? Because I think you and I have a very similar view of politics.
Well, certainly anti-communist.
Or were you already quite conservative at that point?
I think I was probably raised as a conservative voter, but I didn't vote. I don't think. I mean, I went to the Air Force. There wasn't a vote. I was abroad for years. But it wasn't so much that. It was more dictatorship. I came to have a passionate dislike of all forms of dictatorship, which is a form of governmental brutality. And I only lived in one fascist for a while. I was 3 months in Spain, which under Franco was presumably phalangist, i.e. fascist. But that was a regime where they more or less left you alone unless you insisted on making trouble. Whereas in communism, under communism, it was hourly. The surveillance was total. The bugging and the following and the refusal to accept the slightest hint of, what shall I call it, opposition to the governmental system. That was a dictatorship. I lived under, well, I saw the communism in Czechoslovakia, in Hungary, in East Germany, and I just came to dislike it.
And when you came back, you must have been of great interest to the British Secret Services because you would have seen so much and been able to move in a way that they couldn't. How did you balance that with keeping your independence as a journalist?
Basically, I suppose I can say it now because the Cold War is long over, abolished by Gorbachev, I suppose, about 1990. But back then in the days of the Cold War, which was 45 years, 1945 to 1990, and took up most of the life of my generation, this is the Cold War was dangerous. Had it gone hot, we'd all be wasted. But even without it, and twice it became very close to a nuclear war. But even without it, we still had to win that war. We'd have ended up under a communist dictatorship. Eventually, we did win it. The West won it. The Soviet Union was abolished, and world communism was abolished by Gorbachev. And that was the end of the Cold War. We then thought we had what's called the peace dividend, now of course all replaced by Mr. Putin, but never mind. It's a war we had to win. And so when one was asked to do a small favour for this country, I thought it would be churlish to refuse. So on a number of occasions I was asked to, how should I put it, run errands. The media use the word spy far too frequently. The true spy is almost certainly a foreigner. He's inside the structure of the enemy, and he has changed sides and decided to work for us. But occasionally someone has to go in to that situation, pick up a message, a package, deliver or bring it back. I was occasionally used to do that.
But it's quite brave, because as a journalist you didn't have diplomatic immunity.
No.
And the Stasi were not nice people to cross.
No, no. There was no diplomatic cover. And so if you were caught, I was a couple of times. In each case I put on my congenital idiot act and got away with it.
Right.
But had I never been caught carrying seriously incriminating material on my person, then yes, it would have been a prolonged interrogation involving probably violence and possibly execution.
So, I mean, it is, as I say, a very brave thing to have done without that protection. Perhaps you didn't think about it when you were in your 20s and 30s.
I don't think one thought, oh, I'm going to get caught. One thought, no, I can do this. I can do this. The chances are that they won't spot me, and I'll get in, get the message or deliver the message, whatever, and get back out again. And I mean, touch wood. Is there any wood about? Yes. I'm in my chair. Touch wood. I'd always got away with it.
And to come back to politics, you became quite prominent over the Euro campaign. You were strongly against us joining.
I thought it was a bad idea. I'm far from being a Euro or hostile. I'm not, but I do think there's a yawning gulf between cooperation and subordination, and the terms that we finally under Heath, accepted an entry into the EU were so penal that they put us in a subordinate position. That I didn't agree with. It was rather typical that we had an opportunity of going in as a founder member. We rejected it. Our Foreign Office once again got it completely wrong and rejected entry in 1956 when we could have gone in as one of the 7 founder members and absolutely the presiding and dominating founder member. The others at the time were Germany, still making up for the Second World War. France then is still involved in Algeria. Italy in her habitual chaos, and the 3 Benelux states too small really to count. We could have been the president of the EU. But no, we rejected that and waited. Then came de Gaulle, who of course refused point blank to have us under any circumstances. He finally retired from office. His successor, Pompidou, who was his loyal colleague, finally agreed to let us in. It was a question of letting us in, but under penal terms. And that was why I said, when the moment came, no, we should get out.
One final question. You said when we sat down you've got some mementos on the wall. I can't help noticing a great collection of daggers. What do the daggers...
Oh, I don't know. It was a much younger man. I began to collect them. I mean, there are kukris from the Gurkhas and various things from Africa. I just found them and collected them. Those are the kukris. One kukri over there, and some from the Arab world and from West Africa.
Well, I think anybody would be very ill-advised to try and burgle this particular house. Frederick Forsyth, thank you very much. It's been such a pleasure. They say you should never meet your heroes, but actually I met you some years ago, and it is a pleasure to meet one of one's heroes again.
Thank you. Very kind, and same here.
Thank you.